Hi, everyone. I just got a question in my public Facebook group about pricing. And a member said that she is looking at her finances on Etsy, and it says that she has a net profit of negative, like a negative amount. And the first thing to understand is that that's not actually your net profit. And if it says your net profit is negative, then you're losing a lot more money than it's telling you. So let's go into Etsy. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. I'm also going to refer you to an article that I wrote on my artisan shopping directory blog that goes through all of this. It kind of points it out. It has a calculator. So we're going to go look at the calculator, but let's go to Etsy first and I'll show you the net profit thing. All right. This is the payment account for my vintage shop. Now, at this point, I haven't listed anything. That's going to be next month. I'm going to go nuts in my vintage shop. But this month, I haven't listed anything and I've sold one thing. So I'm in the positive as far as getting money in and not spending money out. But this says my net profit on Etsy for this month is $116. That is not true. What this number actually is, this is not net profit. What this is what you earned on Etsy minus your Etsy fees. That is not your net profit. And this drives me crazy because this number is very deceptive. And the fact is that if this number is showing negative, it probably means that you listed a lot of things or you're using Etsy ads that are not converting to sales. And if you're doing that, stop using the ads. There's no reason to pay for ads that don't create sales. Okay, that's just an aside. But if this number is negative, then you're losing a lot more than what it tells you. And let's go into the blog article that I was mentioning before to talk about that. This is my artisan shopping directory blog, which is part of the eShop Success program that I run. So it's a directory for sellers who are in the program, and it has articles about selling on Etsy and buying on Etsy. So if you have customers who have questions, there's probably an answer for it on here. This article is called How to Price Your Products on Etsy plus a Profit Calculator. Okay, now I do have a pricing class. So it's like a pricing guide. It's not really a class, but if you want to get this, it might help you if you're not understanding what I'm talking about for the rest of this video. If you understand it, you probably don't need this, but if you're really just starting out, it's not a bad idea to get it because it goes through everything as far as pricing your products. All right. Now, the problem with pricing handmade is that people tend to look at what other people are charging, but if everybody else is charging way too low, then you're going to be pricing way too low. And the first thing that you need to understand about pricing on Etsy is that you have to price what will the market bear, but you need to check how much you need to charge before you set your price and before you look at what the market will bear. If you're thinking, and I've had this happen to me where I've thought, oh, I'm going to make this thing. Let me see how much it's going to cost me to make it and how much it's going to cost me to pack it and to ship it and how long it's going to take me to make it and the whole thing. And then I go to Etsy and people are charging a lot less than that. And so it's not worth it for me to sell that on Etsy. So you have to look to see what would you have to charge to make a profit and then go look at to see what the market will bear. Okay. Don't do this first. Don't go and say, oh, this is what people are charging. That's what I'm going to charge too, because you're going to lose money. So you have to decide if you're going to make a profit or not, and then decide whether to sell it. Okay. Don't do it backwards. I also have other articles on this blog about pricing digital and pricing vintage, and there are links in here. But what I want to do is go to the Etsy profit calculator. And what this does is it actually breaks things out based on Etsy. And I think the only thing that it's missing is the offsite ads fee. So you have to kind of take that into account. I don't get that many sales from offsite ads, but if you do, then you definitely need to add that into your pricing, but just be aware of it. Okay. So let's say that I have like $10. I'm selling something. Let's do $20 just for argument's sake. Okay. And the buyer pays $0 for shipping. And I think you do have to add this. This is a little quirky. Okay. You have to add in a 0%. You can't just leave these blank. So your total income is $20. So you have to choose one of these. All right. So Etsy does take this into account. This is part of what Etsy is using to say your net profit, because this is how much you're bringing in from Etsy. Etsy is not looking at any of this. Okay. Etsy is not looking at the cost to make the item, your overhead costs, which is things like your machinery, if you have tools that you have to buy, that kind of stuff. If you have licenses you have to pay for, basically every single thing that you have to pay for, you have to take into account when you're pricing your items. And I know that that's difficult, but that's why my pricing guide goes through all that and shows you how to do it. You have to pay yourself a wage. And based on how your taxes work, it doesn't look like you are, but you have to take your time into account because you're just going to be covering your costs if you don't, and you have to make a profit and pay yourself. And profit and your wages are not technically the same thing, even if it does say that on taxes that they are, it's really not. Then you have to take all the Etsy listing fees, and this is accounted by Etsy. Etsy does take this into account in your net profit that they report. So all of this section is, but this is the section here that you really need to be careful of, because if you don't take this into account when you're pricing things, you're not going to make any money and you're going to lose money. So if I don't fill out any of this, and this is the stuff that Etsy is not filling out for you when they're reporting quote unquote net profit. All right. They are taking the fees into account. If I do that, and Etsy is going to say your net profit is $17.65, which is down here, but that's not true. So let's go back up here. Let's say it costs $5 to make that $20 item. Let's say you have, say, $2 in overhead costs once you average everything out, and you have to figure that out for yourself. It's just something that's going to be different for everyone. Let's say that you want to make for yourself $5 every time, and that's how much it's going to cost. So now let's go back down here. And now your profit is $5.65. So that's a lot less than $17.65. This is your net profit after you take all of your other expenses into account. Etsy is not reporting what's actually your net profit. What Etsy is reporting is only your sales that come in minus all of the fees and the cost of the shipping label, which is an expense. So basically, you cannot look at this number and say, oh, this is how much I made. No, that's how much you have on Etsy after Etsy pays you minus fees. Then you have to take a whole lot of other stuff into account. If this number is negative, think about that pricing guide, and you still have to subtract more stuff out from it. Do not look at this number and say, oh, I'm losing a little money. No, you're probably losing a lot of money because you still haven't paid for your materials. None of that is accounted in here. Please look at that article, read through it, use the pricing calculator. And a lot of the pricing calculators that I've seen out there don't take things like overhead, cost of materials, your wages, that kind of stuff. And I go through all that in the pricing guide. Like I said, you don't need to get that. Just use my pricing calculator because it'll remind you that you need to take that kind of stuff into account. So leave me any questions and I will talk to you later.